Okay, I think we will start. Welcome to this APRSAF side event, which is a panel discussion focusing on the topic of expanding domestic industrial space capabilities. My name is Kasia Klatworthy. I'm the head of customer training technology transfer at SSTL in the UK, and I will be the moderator of this session. Just before we start, a few housekeeping rules. Please note that this webinar is recorded, and SSTL will be sharing that recording on our website, YouTube channel for online viewing and promotional purposes. So you can as well share that with your colleagues who are not able to attend. If you have any questions throughout this panel discussion, if you could put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we try to address those at the end of the session. We as well foreseen some polling questions to get really the view on the topic from the audience, which is very important. We want to really engage both parties in that discussion. I think the topic is quite relevant nowadays, with many national space programs globally and in Asia that are focusing on creating the self-sustained, vibrant and capable space industries, supply chain as well, that will serve future national demands in your countries. And I think the emphasis of space program that really shifts from the flagship programs to engagement of the industry and development of the right skills, capabilities, and infrastructure. And I think this is particularly important in the light of the independent activities of the country's sovereignty of national space activities in today's era of rather uncertain and fluctuating geopolitical scene. So I'm very pleased to say that we'll be hearing today from 6 panelists representing the Asian perspective. They represent different countries and can share with us their experience, challenges, opportunities in growing and expanding industrial domestic scene in their countries. So we will have today Dr. Mark Talampas from Philippine Space Agency, followed by Carl Rodriguez from Australian Space Agency, and Dr. Natawat Honganyungun from GISTDA from Thailand, Lynette Tan representing Singapore Space Technology Limited, and Alex De Silva from SSTL. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the Philippines perspective. And I wanted to introduce Dr. Mark Talampas. He's the professor at University of the Philippines, Diliman, but as well, he has a second role. He's working for Philippine Space Agency as Director of Space Technology Missions and Systems Bureau. And under this role, he undertakes the design, implementation of technologies for satellites or different space systems. I know personally, Philippines have rather varied, ambitious space program with the focus on accelerating and transferring the space technology into a vibrant space industry in Philippines. So it will be very interesting to hear from the Philippines what they have achieved so far from the period when the space program really started in their country. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Kasia. Let me just share my screen. So once again, I'm honored to represent PhilSA in this APRSAF side event. And this short talk deals with the Philippines' efforts towards building a local space industry. So first, the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA, is a central government agency addressing all national issues and activities related to space science and technology applications, or SSTL. PhilSA works on the following 6 key development areas, namely national security and development, space research and development, hazard management and climate studies, space education and awareness, international cooperation, and space industry and capacity building. With respect to space industry and capacity building, PhilSA aims to create a robust and thriving space industry to support the country's space program through private sector involvement and cooperation. One of our strategic directions is to accelerate the transfer and diffusion of space technologies and know-how throughout Philippine society towards developing a robust and vibrant local space industry and economy. So prior to PhilSA's inception, there have been numerous Philippine initiatives related to SSTL. So for example, there was the Philippine Microsatellite Program, which produced the country's first small satellites, Diwata 1 and Diwata 2, and its first nanosatellite, Maya 1. But more importantly, the PhilMicrosat program helped us jumpstart our capacity building efforts and help produce highly capable researchers, scientists, and engineers with knowledge and hands-on experience in satellite development. The outputs of these prior initiatives are being built upon by PhilSA, and while we are only a little over 2 years old and building from the ground up, we're not exactly starting from scratch. So one of these initiatives, which is still ongoing, is the Stamina for Space program funded by our Department of Science and Technology. So this program has two component projects which involve the development of a bus and optical payload for future university-based small satellites. So these are PHL-50 and Optica. So PHL-50 focuses on the development of key satellite components such as the structure and mechanisms, onboard data handling, and communications blocks. On the other hand, Optical's objective is to design and develop a scientific and operational optical payload with agricultural monitoring as its primary mission. The growth of a local space industry can be encouraged by actively seeking the participation of local companies in the satellite development process. For both these projects, we leverage the expertise and competency of our local industry. We sought the services of local companies for optical payload manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, fabrication of satellite structures and mechanisms, and co-development of flight software for our onboard computing devices. As much as possible, we also sought to use local facilities for some of the tests, namely the vibration tables, a thermal vacuum chamber, full anechoic chamber, and irradiation facilities. An added benefit of engaging the local supply chain in the satellite development efforts is that we would also be introducing these companies to the international market and exposing them to opportunities for expanding their customer base. Future satellites based on the outputs of these two projects are meant to be experimental university-based satellites. From experimental and technology demonstration-oriented satellites, PhilSA is also working on a more capable satellite, a next-generation satellite, which we call the Multispectral Unit for Land Assessment, or MULA satellite. MULA will be the first commercial-grade satellite of the Philippines and will carry a true-color camera capable of capturing 5-meter resolution images with a wide swath width of 120 kilometers and 9 spectral bands. These can be used for different environmental applications such as disaster management, land use and land cover change mapping, crop monitoring, and forestry management. MULA will also carry an AIS and ADS-B payload. So Filipino engineers and scientists are involved in the development of MULA through the Know-How Training and Transfer, or KHTT program of SSTL. We assembled a team of 16 engineers who took on different roles in the development and eventual operations of the satellite. In building MULA, we leapfrog the development of local technology and innovations that would propel the space industry. MULA is just the first of the next generation satellites that the Philippines will build under our Build in Space, or B3IS initiative. The knowledge and skills to be gained in building the satellite also comes with a license to build similar satellites in country in the future. Similar to prior satellite development efforts, we seek to spur the growth of a local space industry by engaging local companies in the design, manufacture, and AIT activities of future B3IS satellites. To sustain the growth and development of a local space industry, there's a need for a steady stream of capable knowledge workers that will feed into the industry from the academy. PhilSA's efforts in this regard involves the enhancement of space education in the Philippines using a two-pronged approach. First, through a nationwide assessment of the current status of space education in Philippine schools. With this survey, we are able to influence future curriculum revisions, understand the needs of schools for curricular and co-curricular activities that promote space education and awareness, and craft public outreach and awareness activities related to space that are suitable for Philippine schools. The second approach is through the establishment of the PhilSA AD-ASTRA scholarships, which will support graduate students pursuing higher education in space science and technology applications. These efforts to enhance and improve the current state of space education in the Philippines are expected to significantly expand the available pool of researchers, scientists, and engineers that will make up a highly capable workforce for our local space industry. So to summarize, PhilSA's mission is to promote and sustain a robust Philippine space ecosystem that adds and creates value in space for and from Filipinos and for the world. To accomplish this mission, PhilSA recognizes the value of developing and enhancing our local industry's presence in the upstream space sector. We believe that a strong presence in this sector is essential to secure a virtuous circle of capability across the space value chain with important direct benefits and spillover effects. Thank you for listening and I look forward to a fruitful discussion later.
Thank you, Dr. Talampas, for this presentation and your view on the Philippines perspective. I think it's safe to say and nice to see that actually your efforts are mostly focused, I think, on this workforce development, on creating the skills and actually investing into human resources rather than maybe focusing fully on infrastructure from the beginning. So it's all about having the right people with the right skills to then obviously being able to pick up those space technologies and turn that into a successful business. And I think I like as well your approach of having a different type of satellite projects. You mentioned projects focused on education, then some more commercial projects, but all of them, they do involve, they scan the industry, they engage with local companies to provide either components or infrastructure to perform those projects. So I think it's a very kind of comprehensive look and approach that Philippines is developing at the moment. I do have a question to the audience. I'm launching it right now. Should the industry development be focused on the upstream infrastructure companies? So we are talking here about spacecraft manufacturing, downstream service providers, so really focusing on the services coming out of the space technologies, or both. So if our audience could tick the boxes. I think panelists actually cannot vote. I'm sorry. So let's see what the audience is thinking. So our audience is thinking that the industry should really be spread between upstream and downstream, which I think is a correct approach for a kind of vibrant industry, and one without the other doesn't really exist. So you need to have really both, I think, in your country to create the demand for the service to then justify having the upstream manufacturers in your country. Perfect. So let's now move to Australia. We will have here Carl Rodriguez from Australian Space Agency. Carl is Executive Director for Engagement and Industry Growth. So I think from his title, we have the right person on the panel here to talk about Australian industry and space sector. In his role, he's engaging with startups, domestic agencies, state and territory governments to really help the Australian space sector grow. And under his responsibilities, he have quite a few flagship programs that do focus on this industry development. And I think similarly to Philippines, the Australian Space Agency is a relatively new creation. So it would be interesting to see what they have achieved so far and what their plans are with this in this topic. So Carl, over to you.
Thank you, Kazia, and welcome to my colleagues as well too online. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully that is coming through. So again, thank you. It's a pleasure to have been asked to present here, and I'll be relatively quick in terms of the coverage of what the Australian Space Agency has been able to achieve. We have only been alive for 3 short years as an agency. Having said that, Australia has had a long history in space and supporting a lot of the major space players since the early days of space research and space exploration. We were one of the earlier countries to have launched its own satellite from its own soil. We were there, obviously, for the Apollo missions, and supporting those early deep space missions, early lunar missions. And now Australia continues to support the science community globally with a number of deep space missions through Tidbinbilla, which is our deep space tracking network on the east coast, and also through ESA's facilities in New Norcia on the west coast. The Australian Space Agency, though, as I've mentioned, is only 3.5 years old. And we have a strategy that we've put in place to grow the space sector, the private space sector here in Australia, to triple the size of it, in fact, by 2030, and to add 20,000 new high-skilled jobs, both in the upstream and in the downstream segment as well, too, as we were just learning from that recent poll. The strategy that the Australian Space Agency has developed is one that will take us through to 2028 at the moment, and that is built on 4 pillars. It's built on, apologies for the noise in the background, but it's built on international, and that is to open the doors and create the opportunities through collaboration with the international community. We also seek to build out national capability, and we do that through our programs. So in terms of building that, the ability for Australian industry, private sector industry, to compete on an international scale, we are building that capability both at the states and territory levels, but also at the Commonwealth level. We are also the regulator, which is an interesting dimension in terms of being a new space agency, particularly one which is industry focused. But we believe that this is a great opportunity for us to actually blend in the regulations from a learning and emerging industry into something that will support industry's needs in the long term and into the decades into the future. So we like to think of this as building entrepreneurialism through safety. And then, of course, we have nothing inspires like space. And so in terms of addressing those 20,000 new jobs, we will be seeking to outreach to the community, both in the schools as well as tertiary, and to then create those opportunities and that excitement that draws certainly us into the space sector, but then more and more people into the space sector itself. Australia has, as part of its strategy as well, identified 7 key priority areas that we believe that we have something very unique in, that we can bring to a global conversation. And so as part of these areas, we are looking at communications, technologies and services, and that ranges through ground stations, it ranges through RF. The primary and the bulk of the current space sector is in the communications area itself for Australia, but also looking at the next level of technology in terms of optical communications and preparing for that next leap. Earth observation has a significant blend of artificial intelligence, multiple data sets, data analytics, as well as satellite components and capabilities, as does position navigation and timing. And we're working closely with other government departments such as Geoscience Australia to take some of their expertise and then to develop that and deploy that for new commercial solutions that will come through the increased accuracy that we'll be working on to introduce over the coming years. And again, we're looking at logistics solutions, we're looking at delivery solutions, we're looking at smart cities and the capabilities that would come both from a downstream application of those technologies, as well as then the upstream componentry. Space situational awareness and debris monitoring, that is actually a very topical item for discussion. And of course, we believe that given our geography, we can then assist the global community as part of developing and contributing to those data sets that will enable us all to benefit in the future. Leapfrog R&D is everything that's coming out of our research institutions: materials, components, quantum, synthetic biology, as it would apply to space and space opportunities. Robotics and automation, particularly strong coming out of our resources sector, where we are monitoring and operating remote sites that would have significant amounts of autonomous capability and operations, maintenance capability, etc. And so we're adapting those capabilities from our resources and mining sectors and then applying that to space. And then, of course, access to space is again, very topical at the moment. And there's a number of commercial spaceports in development in Australia itself. Underpinning each of these areas, we will be developing what we call roadmaps, 10-year outlooks that are seeking to identify what Australian capability we can bring to the global conversation, what capabilities we may need to develop and to build on, where are the markets anticipated to go so that we can then make intelligent and informed decisions in terms of investment, whether that be government investment or private sector investment, to help build that capability in these areas of interest. We launched our Communications, Technologies and Services Roadmap last December, and we have just announced last week our Earth Observation Roadmap again. So I'd encourage you to view our site, our website, and you can download those 10-year roadmaps that indicate those potential industry investment opportunities and industry growth opportunities. And then the rest of the roadmaps will be coming over the next couple of months, and we hope to have the remainder of them established next year. Beyond identifying these opportunities, we're also investing in Australia. And so our industry growth programs are building that capability that I mentioned earlier. And these are just some of the examples of the programs or the outcomes of these programs that we're deploying. And so we're looking at space data analysis facilities that we're building right next to one of Australia's 2 largest supercomputer facilities to enable all of that data crunching and data analytics to build and to grow new solutions and innovative new outputs. Robotics, automation and artificial intelligence command and control center. Again, we're building that in Perth, and the mission control center in Adelaide. An interesting application, though, of all of these centers is that they will be common and shared user facilities, so that we will be able to essentially give industry that step up where they can focus on their solutions as they work towards market and then avail themselves of these core capabilities as required as part of their solution. We're also investing in companies directly through government grants to build that capability, and that capability in space ranges from human spaceflight capabilities in terms of human aerospace and new spacesuits, artificial intelligence, virtual reality and augmented reality solutions, and some of those elements that we're looking at those key priority areas such as position navigation and timing and space situational awareness. So we're investing in these areas at the industry level to grow that capability. One of our key programs, though, the flagship program at the moment, is our Moon to Mars program. And that is, again, looking at how we can build on our core capabilities in industry so that we can help industry get to the moon and beyond. We were one of the first signatories of the Artemis Accords. And so as part of that, we're looking to see how we can work with our international partners in terms of providing those opportunities to industry. And the first one that we're looking at is in conjunction with NASA. And it's our Trailblazer opportunities, part of the Moon to Mars program, which invests in supply chains, demonstrator opportunities, and this Trailblazer opportunity where we're going to be asking industry to work with us to build what we call a foundation services rover and take that to the moon by 2026. One of the things that I'd like to finish off on, though, is that, again, finishing off where we started, Space is inherently a collaborative venture. And as part of the international collaboration and the national capability build, we know that working together is something of core importance. And so at the bottom of the screen, in 3.5 years, we are building and creating individual memorandum of understanding and other arrangements where we're seeking to open up opportunities with each of these space agencies in a broad engagement sense to then provide some of those opportunities to industry. And on top of industry, as well as investing in industry and providing those government programs, we're also working closely with other industry, and we're saying, please come to the agency, we'll work with you as you develop your strategies to grow the industry yourself and help us triple the size of the economy and to create 20,000 new jobs. And we're particularly interested in all companies from right across the spectrum, and non-traditional space companies that people may not necessarily think of when they think of space. So for example, Woodside is a great example of a company as a resources company that has now turned around and said, to help grow the space industry, we will build a strategy to develop our technology and grow that from where we were and adapt that to space. And there's other companies in there as well too that we're working with that is also looking to build on those capabilities, both upstream and downstream in these particular areas of space. And so with that, I will pause and hand back over to you, Cassia.
Thank you, Carl. I think that was very, very interesting. I actually pick up on 4 points that you mentioned that I wanted to reiterate. First of all, I really like that you are talking about the international collaboration, that, you know, it's not just a closed kind of community and focus only on one country sector, but when working together, we can achieve much more. So we know that obviously from space programs, it's a great example, and your collaboration with NASA under Artemis is another. The other thing that I pick up on was that you provide grants, funds directly to companies. So it's not just the flagship programs, but as well identifying those really good opportunities and niche technologies that can bring your industry forward directly from the agency. And the common shared infrastructure. I mean, we will see probably that this is a common challenge and barrier for the industry to have access to those facilities in the country. So having something that is a shared and common could leapfrog their developments and help them out tremendously. So that's great to see. And the last point was about the regulations that you mentioned to create safe environment for the businesses so they can plan long term ahead. I think that's an excellent tip for other listeners. So thank you very much, Carl, for that. And I have another question to the audience. I can actually allow panelists to participate. This we had last time. Sorry. Question 2. Oh, perfect. So for the local space sector to grow, what are the right criteria to assess its value? So we have a return on government investment, value to the economy, or number of companies in space sector. I think Carl, during his presentation as well, was talking about the number of employees in space sector, for example, as another criteria to assess the value. So I'll give a few seconds, and I think panelists can now answer as well, if they wish so. Okay, so we have 75% of people answered so far. I'll give 5 more seconds. Okay, so I'm finishing off. Okay, so the result is actually majority of people believe that the value to the economy of this space industry is the best way to assess its value and its success. I don't know, Carl, would you mind commenting on that? as you were the last panelist.
That is an interesting result, and I think that the value to the economy is something that encompasses a number of those sorts of areas. You know, the return on investment to the government, as we do our investment into building the space sector itself. Of course, we reference other reports that say every dollar spent will return, you know, X dollars in benefit. And I think that that's an element of return to the return on investment to government. But I think the whole value to the economy is really quite key, because that brings more and more people from outside of the traditional space sector into growing and building on capabilities that they may already have, but then can be applied to the space sector itself. And one of the mantras that we always go through with the Australian Space Agency is the broader economy. And so as we try to generate that interest in the economy and in the space sector, we continue to say that, yeah, space is more than satellites and rockets. It is everything. It is materials. It is data analytics. It's accountancy. It's modeling. It's artificial intelligence. It's all of these things that we can and have significant business capability already in, and look at space as a new market. And I think that value to the economy then is part of how we would then assess where we put our investment dollars in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Carl, for the comment. I do have actually a question directly to you, so we may address it now as well. Australian Space Agency, are you planning to have any human missions to space?
That's a very good question. I think it's the answer is there will definitely be missions in the future. We don't have one at the moment in planning at this stage, though.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to Thailand. We will have from Thailand Dr. Natawat Honganyungon, who is Director of Space Technology Development Office at GISTDA. And he's responsible for building up the ecosystem in Thailand through research and industry. And currently, he has essential role to strategically scale up space technology activities in Thailand and in the region. I know from personal perspective experience with working with GISTDA for the last 2-3 years, they have quite ambitious plans to grow the space sector and how they do that, and to build up the capability in country. So let's hear from Dr. Natawat.
Good morning, Kasia. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. So let me share my screen first. Okay, this is full screen. Okay, so yeah, so again, I'm Natawat Hongkanjanakul, Director of Space Technology Development Office in GISTDA. As you mentioned and we discussed for a while about the space industry, actually they are both sectors, as you mentioned, upstream and downstream. So today I'm gonna focus mainly on the upstream, which is very new for Thailand. If you know, like GISTDA, the name of GISTDA is Geoinformatics and Technology Development Agency. So we did many activities for Earth observation, for the satellite navigation, and most satellite data from downstream. But the upstream one is very new for Thailand. It's very new for GISTDA. So it's today the point that I would like to highlight in both sectors. The first one is the satellite manufacturing, and the second one is the ground station services, which is the service that have come recently to Thailand. For the first one, satellite manufacturing, if you know some idea about the space program in Thailand, we have the first program called TOS, or Thailand Earth Observation System, phase 1 about 15 years ago, which is the phase 1. And now we are running phase 2. And one of that is to build a small satellite But it's not only the satellite itself, but the aim is to make the workforce or capacity building and also the supply chain for the satellite manufacturing or satellite component parts, which is the new thing in Thailand. And this program, we very well collaborate with Airbus and Surrey. And thank you again for Surrey for this contribution. So the program, we had about 20 engineers that trained very well from UK, from SSTL, and with the satellite, the small satellite, about 100 kilogram. And then with that satellite, we will have the final assembly in our brand new facility, AIT, Assembly Integration and Testing in Thailand. And it is located at Space Innovation Park, Suriyacha, Chonburi, which is my office. It is about 1 hour from Bangkok. So like, the upstream or satellite manufacturing in this program, it can be the very big stepping stone for Thailand to make such a satellite manufacturing activity. And a part of that, we built the supply chain of the satellite part. And this program, our engineer from Thailand that we train in UK, they have linked with the satellite, the design of the satellite, and they link with the engineer in Thailand to seek the supplier, and the supplier, both of them are most of them are the car manufacturer or the spacecraft or aircraft manufacturer. So they are seeking both mechanical part and electronic part. Finally, we got about 33 parts, and we can engage about 14 companies. So if we success for those manufacturing, I think we can make about 23 of the satellite component part by weight of the 100 kilogram of satellite. This is a very beginning point of to make the supply chain of the satellite part in Thailand. And we are very well have idea about how to get involved in the supply chain. For example, the quality standard or the design, which is very complex one. Yeah. So the second part that I would like to highlight today is about ground station services. You know well that when we talk about the upstream, we always think about the satellite launcher or rocket, etc. But the important thing, one of the important thing is the ground station that can link between the ground or the control section to the satellite. And GISTDA, we have our own ground station, but with our experience that we developed so far, for example, the mission control, the image data archive, or the flight dynamic of the satellite. So we do have experience on that, and today we can extend our capability to make a service. And I give you an example of Swedish Space Corporation. They had an investment of the ground station in Thailand, and I think this is can be a new point that we can highlight to make such a business and growth for the space industry in Thailand. And today we see many demand that many countries would like to use the ground station in Thailand or the location in the equatorial area, for example, Japan, France, USA, China, or South Korea. So I would say that this is also a new point that we would like to focus for the upstream of the space industry. Yeah. From that 2 points, we can make very first of space industry cluster in Thailand and mainly focus on the upstream space. And we point into 2 schemes that I mentioned before. the satellite manufacturing and the ground segment, and we have the cluster and build a directory for 2021, and we will keep continuing to make such activity and directory for space industry development from now on. Yeah, this is the point and update for upstream space industry in Thailand to be the complementary of the downstream that we have been developing for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Natawat. Again, I think it's a very informative point of view from Thailand, and to me, combining really some of the points that we heard from Philippines and Australia. And I do like how you have kind of like a central satellite program around which you centered really all the activities of in-country facility use and building that infrastructure, again, to be shared with others for the future demands of your country. But as well, I like that you are linking the designers of the spacecraft with the industry, identifying those companies and enabling them to be onboarded, to know the quality standards, to then deliver the right components for that particular program, which obviously will enable them to participate in future demands and future programs of Thailand. So you are building that supply chain from ground up. And I know your engineers are very involved in that kind of outreach activities. Yeah. So that's great to hear. Thank you very much. And one more question to the audience. Where should investment be directed, in your opinion? Government space programs, university space research, or industrial space projects? So I would say it's a bit of a tricky question. Probably each of them has some merit, but let's see what majority of you think. And again, I think panelists can vote as well. Okay, one more second. Finished, and I share the results. So 70% of people from the audience think that we should be investing in industrial space projects. And then a similar amount think government university space research. Dr. Natawat, would you mind commenting? What's your opinion? Knowing you are representing government.
Okay, so for me, I also support for the budget to the private sector or industry, because I think finally the industry will make the supply chain and the sustainability of the space program. Finally, I think the trend now is to be the private sector, not in the government anymore. So government can make a role as a supporter of the program, of the roadmap, the strong vision of the country. I think this is the thing that government should make the direction of that.
Thank you very much. And let's move on now to Singapore. We have a question later to come back to Thailand. So from Singapore, we have Lynette Tan from the Singapore Space and Technology Limited, and she's the chief executive of that organization. She identifies new opportunities and develops effective ways for the government, companies, individuals to partake in the emerging Asian space industry. So I think she'll have a lot of points to share with our audience on that topic. Over to you,
thanks. Thank you, Kezia. Thank you for having me here in this APRSAF side event and to talk about the domestic and industrial space capabilities for national and regional benefit. This is an interesting part for me to contribute, from a non-government perspective in an emerging space nation. So I think because we are, from our perspective, we could share more about concrete projects to do, how we want to build up the space capabilities. We don't yet have a space agency in Singapore, so, learning from all of you is important. There is an Office for Space Technology and Industry housed, Austin, and hopefully in a few years' time, they can also be sharing about our space agency activities. But nice to be here to create diversity and to share the NGO perspective in building up the capabilities. Where interestingly, a lot of you did say, like Australia or Philippines, like, there's a new space agency created. So SSTL, sorry for the similar abbreviation, we're not a space agency, but we're a very relatively old organization here in Asia Pacific, established almost 15 years ago. And one of the key things is to build a lot of pillars of activities for, to connect with the local ecosystems and also to spread the regional partnership. And to do that, right, we have many international partners. One of our earliest partners, not SSTL, well, not SSTL, but Singapore, was actually the Surrey SSTL with Sir Martin Sweeting and Alex when we built the Malayan project many years ago. So that really helped in the capability and capacity building from very early years. Okay, so stepping up into our role in Singapore and maybe establishing potential areas to work with, to share with all of you, one of the work that we do is in creating a space accelerator program that's very recent, 2 years ago. And this is in support with the government agencies in Singapore. But we do access international startups from all over the world, particularly during this pandemic, where it was very difficult in the last 24 months to travel. The accelerator program is virtual and online, and we've been getting very good traction from companies, startups from all over the world, and helping us to expand the regional network and global network that we have here in Singapore, and also allowing the international startups to access the funding and the resources available in Singapore. We currently have, I think, 36 companies, and it's a good split between those based in Singapore and then those based internationally. And this is a very important program because it does help in the country to build up capacity and technology developments, but also because startups require an international base to expand, and therefore through using Singapore as a launch pad, they were able to access a lot of international markets as well. And to that end, we also have a relationship with Australia after they set up the space agency. To access launch capabilities, in like our backyard, because Singapore is very, very small as a country. So we don't have, the traditional launch capabilities that Australia could develop. We also work with the Philippines and GISTDA, Thailand, through the APRSAF network on the education and outreach. And we also talk to some of the emerging companies in this region. We also have partnership with another Singapore agency, GISTDA, which is kind of like the InQtel in Singapore, to look into space, defense startups that could have the kind of potential for commercialization. And with that, we also signed a memorandum of understanding with Australia's Northern Territories, because they would have the equatorial launch, possibility. And then we talk about benefiting the region, right? Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific is unfortunately an area where there is a lot of disaster, and with climate change, extreme weather, the frequency is more, the intensity is higher. So for 3 years, since 3 years ago, we have started an HADR challenge initiative to raise awareness, to create another technology-based platform for HADR efforts in the region. Oft-cited is the Centennial Asia program, and then to raise that to awareness, and of course with the capacity building for younger talent, to get them involved in the industry, in understanding the industry and to contribute. So some of the key learnings is, with the commercialization of the space tech industry, the HADR ecosystem could tap onto the new space economy to provide ubiquitous access to information that could help in HADR. Obviously through this platform, we are promoting tech for good, and we're connecting cities remotely using space assets and space tool without politics. Of course, we all understand from this industry that the granularity of data is not ideal. There's data lag, so we're looking into new technologies like machine learning, predictive technologies to be able to provide more information, smart intelligence to help with HADR. That's all I have here. So a really quick sharing, and feel free to reach out to me if you need anything.
Thank you, Lynette. I think it's an excellent example of a little bit different approach. I think Singapore in the region is, from point of location, economy, is slightly different country. So this new space accelerator program is a great new example of how you are supporting the industry, and the mix of the companies you're getting, the international, the local kind of hub base that will enable them to launch their services not only within Singapore but internationally. I think it's a great view that maybe some of our audience will be interested in implementing in their own countries, if obviously that model suits them. So last and not least, we have Alex Da Silva from SSTL to kind of maybe sum up, I think, the discussion. Alex is our recognized expert in small satellite missions, and he has been with SSTL since really its inception and worked on more than 60 small satellite missions. I hope he can nicely summarize the discussion, providing overview of what is needed to create this thriving industry. So I hand over to Alex.
Okay, so thank you, Kasia. So I'll just try and share my screen. So we've heard quite a bit about the overall space industry, and one of the key factors in this, as we know, space is increasingly being used in governments. I'm not going to go through because we're running out of time, but there's a lot of applications that we all are using these days. So space becomes more and more important for most nations. But I'll jump to the challenges at the bottom of the slide here. So to get involved in the space industry, some of the challenges are that there's a low return on investment on upstream activities. So getting companies involved can be quite challenging without supporting them. And without there being projects around, it is very difficult to get upstream activity started. So that I will come back to that. The volumes are typically low, and there are long time periods between projects and often very high quality requirements. So that can be quite challenging for companies as well. And then access to global markets is complicated for a number of factors as well. So really, when you look at all of these challenges, what you really need, and I think we've concluded this in a poll as well, is having involvement from academia, industry, and government really working together on projects to fill in the various gaps. So without government projects, it's very difficult for industry to get involved in the first place. But without academia, you wouldn't necessarily be able to maintain that industrial capability either. And so really it's a mix of each, and we're not saying that government is going to fund every possible mission that's out there. In the end, once you have a sustainable system, you will have a proportion of missions that are driven by government for addressing societal needs, and there will be other missions that are purely commercial missions or even academic missions. So really it's about having a mix of each one of these. And when you look at how industries and countries have developed their space capabilities, it's very interesting to look at small sats as a starting point for these type of projects. So shown here in a chart is the years from left to right. We have years, and from top to bottom, we have countries getting involved in launching space missions. Each blue dot is one or more space missions launched that year. And the red dots are the ones where that country launches a satellite with the help and the technology development from another country. So it's a bilateral type project. And what you can see here very easily is that most of the first projects in countries, particularly countries starting their space activities, they are these type of bilateral capabilities. So these type of international partnerships are extremely important. The chart on the right basically shows that there's now over or nearly 80 countries that have launched small satellites. So what you can also see in this chart is that there are many, once a satellite is launched, there are many recurring missions year by year. Some countries more active than others. You can also see some actually continue through working with these type of bilateral projects, which can bring lots of benefits because sometimes you're sharing costs and sharing capability. So this is very useful for developing capability. So in SSTL, we've done 20 of these projects. We have a lot of lessons learned, which I won't go through in detail here. And Dr. Natawan has already presented the work that we've been doing on THEOS-2. So this again has been very interesting for us as a supplier, because also we've learned a lot about how to onboard companies in various different countries, different than our own country. How can you transfer this type of capability to local suppliers? So I'll hand back to Kasia at that point.
Thanks, Alex, for the summary. I'll actually have a question to you from the audience. How can the UK space industry attract engineers from industries hit by the pandemic? So aviation, travel, how can UK space industry attract those to help them grow? Do you have some?
To be fair, I mean, space industry is growing in most countries. So attracting staff is both feasible, but also challenging. I think there are a lot of skilled people on the market now. So and there is a lot of demand from the space sector. So to work in the space sector actually requires a number of people, not just with engineering degrees, but much wider than that often. So these days there are many opportunities in the space sector. Now, to attract these people, the challenge is to have attractive packages often for these people to work on. One of the benefits is space is generally inspirational. So you can appeal to people that are interested in these type of areas in any case. But also you will need to attract people with exciting work in the end, which in space is not that challenging to do. I can see this in Asian countries where we have many startups as well. We're seeing many companies start up with university graduates because space is an exciting area to work in, and it is now becoming possible to work in space from a purely commercial standpoint. So there are many service companies emerging particularly in Asian countries. There's a lot of new companies now across the region there that are raising funding for particular aspects, and they are able to attract people from university, fresh graduates generally.
Okay, thanks. I actually have another question to SSTL. So you may stay online. What methods have SSTL adopted for creating supply market for budding startups? Not entirely sure if I understand it correctly, but I think it's about obviously us engaging in creating the supply chain, maybe in other partnering countries, like maybe we do with Thailand.
Yeah, I guess it is in engaging. Engaging can be at different levels. So we can provide support and training, as we do on some of these projects, to transfer capability very quickly. So and this is true from what we've seen from the other panelists to start their projects. Some of the panelists we are supporting with their space programs or have supported in the past. Others can move on quite readily by themselves. But essentially, what we do is provide that quick access to reliable capability. So to build a new spacecraft and to get a product in orbit to test, for instance, to test your own technologies, it can take 5 or 10 years before you have something that is developed and reliable. So the key here, and I'll bring this back to these collaborations actually, these collaborations are key in getting something in orbit quickly. So you're leveraging capability elsewhere in order to do something quickly. So for startups, this is very important, because a startup often wants to build a service, and to build a service, you need a reliable satellite product. So you can leverage a reliable satellite product and develop your own capabilities on top of that. And this is very similar to what we're seeing in the IT industry. The hardware is really very commonplace, and what is really where the business is in the services. So it's very similar to the mobile phone industry, what we're seeing with apps, and what we're seeing in the IT industry.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I have one more question to Dr. Natawat from Thailand. So maybe if he can come back online.
Yes.
What are the services that the ground station will provide in Thailand? Can you elaborate on what are the services on the ground segment kind of area?
Okay. So the ground service, they are both LEOP. Once we get launched the satellite, we have to track the satellite into the orbit, which is that can be one of the service. And another one is the service to communicate with the satellite, and the customer can get just the data finally. So the ground station, we do like ground station as a service. We can say that. And a part of that, we also have a small section of the service we call TT&C, or just the telecommunication of the ground station and satellite. Yeah, this is a service that we made.
Okay, thank you, Natawat. I hope that answers the question from the audience. If you have any more questions, you can pop them here, but I do note that we are now out of time, so I don't want to stop anybody from their daily plans. And I know some of the panelists are quite late joining us on this panel. So I think I'll summarize that, even though the countries that we had presenting today, they are from the same region, very closely geographically, and they have, I think, the same goals. They actually are achieving those goals in slightly different ways, and that's obviously fine. Some of them focus on the national flagship projects funded by the government, which then gradually distribute the work to industry. So that's something like Thailand is doing, for example, whereas others bring as well the grants, funds directly targeting the industry, like Australia, for example. And some took advantage of the partnership approach on the international stage, like Singapore and Philippines. So I think it's safe to say that I think the common thread is we all would like to have independent, thriving space industry that work well for the government. And there are different ways to achieve that. So I hope that our audience appreciate the different ways and points shared by our panelists on today's APRSAF side event. So I think if there are no more questions from the audience, then I will conclude that, and we can say have a nice the rest of the day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.